had called to tell me that he was mistaken, that no such operation had been authorized. We left standing, however, the allegation that Mr. Gates had personally met with a Chilean arms dealer, Carlos Cardon, who was one of the biggest shippers of arms to Iraq in the world, and that Gates was intimately involved in the transfer of arms and technology to Iraq. As we told you at the time, the White House denied the charge. They denied it categorically. Mr. Gates never met with Carlos Cardon. To this day, our sources, and there are 3 of them, insist that the allegations are true. What we have learned, though, in the reporting we've done over the past 2 months has failed to produce specific, additional information directly implicating Robert Gates. With a man's career in the balance, that needs to be said. There are still significant questions about what Mr. Gates knew or should have known about U.S. arms and technology going to Iraq, and specifically about the activities of Carlos Cardon. More about that a little later. When we broadcast our last report, the White House issued the following denial. The whole story is unfounded. There were never any sales, covert or overt, to Iraq or Iran through a third country. In this broadcast, we will tell you what we know about the transfer of arms to Iraq. But first, you need to understand the climate that was generated here in Washington towards Iraq during the early 1980s. Howard Teicher is a Middle East specialist who served on President Reagan's National Security Council at the White House.
I mean, there was no way that any casual observer who took any interest in Iraqi matters and the Arab-Israel situation, the Middle East situation, could but conclude that Iraq was an enemy of the United States.
And yet in that climate, you're saying, there were people at the senior-most level in the Reagan administration who were pushing for the shipment or the transfer of arms and technology to the Iraqis.
At a minimum, they were saying we should find ways to let things happen that we don't know about.
Caspar Weinberger was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense. I told him a few days ago that we had learned of the shipment of U.S. artillery in the early 1980s from Jordan to Iraq, and that the U.S. was aware of the transfer.
The idea of any retransfer from Jordan out was strictly forbidden, completely forbidden, and had it happened, we would have had every possible sanction we could use to prevent it occurring again.
In the Defense Department and the State Department, I began to hear unconfirmed reports that transfers had taken place. Jordan denied it formally and vigorously, and the U.S. didn't press the case. This is a good example of a way that communications can be established and approvals can be given with winks and nods without documentation and with plausible deniability.
We had also learned, I told Mr. Weinberger, of the transfer of U.S. satellite intelligence to Iraq as early as 1982.
Well, they're quite wrong about that. There's no assistance given to Iraq and no intelligence that I know of given to Iraq. Nothing that I recall in the way of any kind of affirmative support, technology, weapons, or anything of that kind given to Iraq.
That, of course, is Mr. Weinberger's recollection in the current climate of 1991, when the notion of assisting Iraq with weapons and military intelligence is far less palatable than it was, say, in 1987, when Secretary Weinberger testified before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Secretary, following up the chairman's question, could you tell us about Iraq? What help did we give Iraq?
Iraq?
That's right.
Well, we've given very substantial help to...
also intelligence?
To Iraq, yes, sir, yes. We should go into that more in closed hearings, but we have. And we have also, I think, tried to be of assistance in a number of other ways.
Secretary Weinberger, Secretary Haig first, and then Secretary Schultz, McFarland, Clark, Poindexter, all had different views on what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And the president, for better or for worse, was unwilling to assert discipline over his cabinet officers in these matters.
Richard Pearl was an Assistant Secretary of Defense under Secretary Weinberger.
When you lack clear guidelines, everybody becomes a policymaker of his own, and people sense things differently, they read them differently, they act differently, and then you get a breakdown of cohesive policy.
William von Raab was U.S. Commissioner of Customs.
Customs was extremely concerned on my watch, which ended in 1989, with weapons going to Iran. I would say that, except as a routine matter, weapons going to Iraq were off our screen entirely.
When you say off your screen, you mean you didn't care?
There were no special operations or special efforts underway to prevent arms from going to the United States to Iraq.
In 1982, the United States gave the world a clear signal that relations with Iraq were improving. It dropped Iraq from its list of states that support terrorism. And around the world, a variety of interested parties watched, listened, and drew their own conclusions. Lebanese arms dealer Sarkis Saganalian, who claims to have worked with and sometimes in behalf of the CIA for many years, began selling Austrian artillery to Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard.
It's a long history, my friend. The 155 millimeter guns that went from Austria, you think the U.S. didn't know about it? I informed them. I told them what was happening. They said, sure, go ahead and help them as much as you can.
It wasn't just a tilt toward Iraq, it was an opening of the floodgates. At times, U.S. laws were violated. There was an official atmosphere that ranged from indifference to tolerance and sometimes even outright cooperation. It was a perfect environment for a man like Chilean arms dealer Carlos Cardón. That story in a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer.
Automotive Industries calls Ford Crown Victoria's modular V8 a work of art. Automobile Magazine says the interior is what you'd expect from a car built with luxury in mind. Motor Trend says Crown Victoria redefines what a full-size American sedan should be. The new Ford Crown Victoria. Discover it for yourself. Have you driven a Ford lately?
I'm alive, Jeff Hashimoto.
I'm alive, Rhonda Williamson.
I'm alive, Sonia Schofield.
I'm alive, Howard Weber.
Want to get more out of life?
I'm alive, Jessica Weber.
Get airbags. See your Allstate agent for a list of cars with airbags.
We're alive.
If I didn't have a great relationship with the factory, I couldn't get the cars I get now in volume. The availability of some of these products is scarce, as people know, and we don't have a problem with availability. We can get the cars. We have a tremendous selection of automobiles, 5 dealerships, 3,000-4,000 cars in stock, and that's what people want. So that's why I say, if you don't come see me today, I can't save you any money.
Say hello to news, sports, and entertainment on Paragon Cable. Plus, order Paragon Cable with exciting HBO and get 100 minutes of free long distance from U.S. Sprint. For details, call Paragon Cable now. Get connected.
Sunday on This Week with David Brinkley. Should Robert Gates be the next director of the CIA? And with the fall of communism, do we even need a CIA? Sunday.
Think about it for a moment. What was the biggest single scandal of the Reagan administration in which the will of Congress was circumvented by the use of private arms dealers selling weapons in the Middle East? Iran-Contra, right? It's a scandal that resonates to this day, that caused Robert Gates to withdraw his first nomination as CIA director, and that still casts a shadow on his confirmation hearings that are due to begin on Monday. But it is becoming increasingly clear that the issue of aid to Iraq will be another major focus of his hearings. The sheer quantity of technology, weapons, and money that were transferred to Iraq over roughly the same period dwarfs anything that went to Iran. Remember, official U.S. policy was that no help should go to either side. In reality, the Reagan administration was split. Some senior officials supporting Iran, others Iraq. And to those who wanted to see Iraq helped, the man you're about to meet was in a perfect position to be of assistance.
Of course, we couldn't be less than proud because we found that we were able to do things that we didn't even dream that we were able to do.
This is Chilean arms dealer Carlos Cardon back in 1984, not long after he began a lucrative new business, the sale of cluster bombs to Iraq. Much has been made of the fact that cluster bombs are particularly nasty and deadly anti-personnel devices, designed to inflict maximum damage on heavy troop concentrations. Cardon's cluster bombs depended on the transfer of a key weapons technology that was developed in the United States. Steve Bryan is a former Pentagon official.
If he didn't get it from the U.S., he may not have been able to build the cluster bombs properly. So the answer to your question, how important were these transfers? They're probably very important. They may have been critical.
Remember, Cardon is from Chile. During the 1980s, the transfer of any kind of weapons technology from the United States to Chile was illegal. The CIA's position on Cardon is definitive. The agency told Nightline, the CIA has never had a relationship of any type with Carlos Cardon. Somehow, though, Cardon arranged for the transfer of cluster bomb technology to Chile and set up his own factory to build them. As Nightline reported earlier, that technology came from ISC, International Signal and Control, of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In October of 1984, ISC and Cardon signed an agreement, in effect carving up the world's cluster bomb market. Cardon would sell to all those countries with which ISC was prevented under U.S. law from doing business. Could all of this have gone on without the knowledge of the U.S. government? Senior Israeli officials have told Nightline that in the 1980s they were informed directly by the U.S. government that Carlos Cardon was producing cluster bombs using U.S. technology and that these were being shipped to Iraq. Furthermore, several ISC executives claim a long-standing relationship with U.S. intelligence. By 1988, Cardon was not only selling cluster bombs to the Iraqis, he built them their own cluster bomb factory, like this one in Baghdad. He also provided the Iraqis with thousands of fuses to arm chemical weapons that were used in the Iran-Iraq War. And according to foreign intelligence reports, Iraq was working on cluster bombs to dispense chemical and biological weapons with Cardon's help. By the time Iraq invaded Kuwait, Cardon was also finishing a plant to produce sophisticated fuses for artillery shells and fuel-air explosives. Some of that advanced technology also came from the United States.
What I do know is the components for those fuses were made here and purchased here and were critical parts of the fuses.
Earlier in the decade, during the bloody Iran-Iraq War, Cardon provided tens of thousands of low-tech bombs, again, employing U.S. technology. Cardon had purchased, in the United States, key equipment from 2 munitions factories, which he shipped to Chile. He did that at a time when the U.S. arms embargo against Chile was in effect. This picture shows Cardon inspecting one of the plants which produced artillery shells. Retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Carlos Rickardson worked for Cardon in the early 80s. He remembers what happened with that plant.
He had a great deal of trouble with U.S. Customs, and U.S. Customs stopped the shipment and held it up for, I guess, perhaps maybe even a year before it finally got broken loose and was shipped to Chile.
The plant was designated as scrap metal and shipped from New Orleans. Another plant capable of producing aerial bombs came from Los Angeles.
You saw the plant in L.A., you saw the plant in Chile. Would you consider that plant scrap metal?
It's not hardly a scrap metal plant. He was very selective on the pieces of equipment that he took out of that plant, and mainly the presses, which are essential to making the casings.
The reference is to bomb casings. Carlos Cardón ultimately became one of Iraq's biggest sources of munitions during the 80s. With Robert Gates about to begin his confirmation hearings on Monday, the CIA in particular has taken great pains to emphasize that neither Gates personally nor the agency as a whole has had any type of relationship with Carlos Cardón. The agency even faxed us a letter that Cardón wrote last July to the U.S. ambassador in Chile. In that letter, Cardón denies that he was a conduit for the agency and denies ever meeting Robert Gates. Indeed, Cardón, who is currently facing several grand jury investigations, complains bitterly in his letter that he is being unjustly persecuted by the U.S. government. He claims he has kept them thoroughly informed of all his commercial activities through the U.S. Embassy in Santiago. Which brings us to James Teberge, who was, in the mid-1980s, U.S. ambassador to Chile. Shortly after leaving his post in 1985, Ambassador Teberge went to work for Carlos Cardón, heading up one of his offices, Swissco Management Group, here in Washington.
Ambassador Thurbage's functions for Cardón was probably one of opening doors, setting up marketing programs for Cardón, and kind of the same thing that I did, except obviously at a little higher level.
These days, as we've told you, the CIA is so eager to distance itself from Carlos Cardón that it has issued a categorical denial that a relationship of any type existed between Cardón and the agency. Such things are difficult to prove, but consider this. Ambassador Teberge went to work for Cardón around October of 1985. A colleague, indeed the man who ultimately succeeded Teberge at Swissco, has consulted his records and tells us that the ambassador worked for Cardón until February of 1987. Teberge died in January of 1988, but his widow tells us that before he died, he took on another job. For a year to a year and a half, she told us, Ambassador Teberge worked for the CIA. In other words, he worked for Cardón until February of 87 and died 11 months later, in January of 88. But Mrs. Teberge recalls her husband serving on the CIA's senior review panel. She initially told us that her husband worked on the panel for the last 12 to 18 months of his life. Today, she said, she couldn't recall precisely how long Ambassador Teberge worked for the agency. At the very least, Teberge went directly from his job with Cardón to a job with the agency. But there is reason to believe that he actually worked for both, for a few months at least, at the same time. Incidentally, the function of the senior review panel is to advise one man, the director of Central Intelligence. And for at least part of the period in question, there was an acting director of the CIA, Robert Gates. We'll attempt to pull some of these threads together when we come back.
Did you know that the most valuable patent ever issued went to a small business owner, Alexander Graham Bell? Since then, AT&T has stayed on the cutting edge of communications. For example, AT&T just invented a new 800 service for small businesses. It uses your existing line and costs only $6 a month. At AT&T, almost half our business comes from small business.
Question of holding the Bush or Reagan administrations to account for having made mistakes in regard to their policies toward Iraq. The issue is how those policies were implemented. As we've reported over the past few months, the Atlanta branch of an Italian bank, BNL, was able to funnel billions, some of it in U.S. credits, to Iraq's military procurement network. The U.S. government knew and turned a blind eye. Sophisticated military technology was illegally transferred from a major U.S. company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, to South Africa and Chile, and from there on to Iraq. The Iraqi-born designer of a chemical weapons plant in Libya set up shop in Florida, producing and then shipping to Iraq chemical weapon components. The CIA, the FBI, and other federal agencies were made aware of the operation and did nothing to prevent it. During the 1980s and into the 90s, senior officials of both the Reagan and Bush administrations encouraged the privatization of foreign policy, certainly towards Iran and Iraq. The policy may have had merit, but they weren't willing, or in some instances weren't successful, in fighting it out on Capitol Hill. So they found other ways. They made a mockery of the export control system. They found ways of encouraging foreign governments to do what our laws prohibited. They either knew, or if not, were guilty of the grossest incompetence, that U.S. companies were collaborating with foreign arms merchants in the illegal transfer of American technology that helped Saddam Hussein build his formidable arsenal. This week, the CIA again told Nightline that our allegations over the past few months regarding covert operations to supply Iraq with U.S. arms and weapons technology were simply untrue. The CIA's Inspector General, says a statement from the agency, has found no factual support whatsoever for such an operation or for the involvement of Mr. Gates. At least one member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Bill Bradley of New Jersey, feels that there may be reason to doubt both those claims, and he'll raise the issues at the Gates confirmation hearings next week. The CIA also told us that its Inspector General has found no evidence of any off-the-books illegal activities. But the CIA concedes that off-the-books activities are not documented, precisely so that deniability can be preserved. One thing is undeniable. This gun sight video of a stealth fighter bomber from the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing last February attacking a bomb factory on the outskirts of Baghdad. U.S. technology in the air, destroying U.S. technology on the ground. The factory was built by Carlos Cardone.
Have you ever seen someone when they come out of a salon?
Stage of distributing authority, as Mr. Yeltsin just mentioned. There will be inter-republican structures which will interact, and with regard to control over the foodstuff situation and distribution of foodstuffs and questions of Western investments, we will utilize the Republican committees, and we'll have this type of cooperation. But more and more, we hope that this will be shifted to the republics, and in general, in creating a market-type space and in creating a normally functioning market. The enterprises, the corporations themselves, the producers who ultimately should be acting, they will be the ones to act. So we are going to be moving toward a market and changing our approaches.
Forgive me for pursuing this one point further with Mr. Yeltsin. Mr. Yeltsin, are you saying that the Russian Republic, if there is a serious winter ahead, will take care of itself, and that the other republics will have to take care of themselves?
Вы правильно поняли.
You have correctly understood me.
Но я должен сказать, что вчера я...
But I should say that yesterday I was listening to the leader of the committee, the Inter-Republican Republican Committee on Economic Questions, Mr. Salayev, who is today the Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, and he said he had been working on this question with all the republics, all 15, and all of them had agreed on cooperation. So I think that which Mr. Boris Nikolaevich said does not exclude cooperation and coordination, and at the same time, each republic will have its own specific area of questions with regard to foodstuffs, among other things, and they will work on these questions individually.
As to say, the American leadership must bear in mind it will be necessary to change somewhat the system of relationships with the Soviet Union. There has to be a two-path system. Contractual relations with the Union about the principle, but everything that refers to detail, economics, science, introducing new production technologies, new technologies, social issues, culture. This will be an element which will be done directly through the republics by direct agreement between the United States and Russia. And we had a conversation on this score with U.S. President Bush.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question comes from Houston in Texas. I beg your pardon, in New York City, right behind me. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
My name is Hans Ephraimson. I'm the chairman of the Victims' Families Committee of Korean Airlines Incident Tragedy of 1983. My question is to Mr. Yeltsin. Are you going to order the release of the bodies of the 269 passengers of Korean Airlines Flight 007, dead or alive? And are you going to extend compensation to the needy families in 16 countries?
I will cooperate with the work of your committee. Whatever problems you may have, I'm ready to help you.
Our next question is from Houston, Texas.
Gentlemen, my name is Jack Siegel. I'm a rabbi in Houston, Texas. Anti-Semitism has been part of the Soviet Union for many, many years. That's why 150,000 Jewish people have left in the last 18 months, and 1 million still want to leave at the present time. Can you tell me, do you think that anti-Semitism will become weaker in the Soviet Union now? Will it remain the same? Will it possibly become stronger? What about the Pamyat organization, which is a very, very strongly anti-Semitic organization? What about its future?
Mr. Yeltsin, perhaps you take that first?
Yeah, I've had dealings with Pamyat for quite a long time. More than 1 year at least. I think in its work is becoming different. It's not such so extreme as it was when it was started in 1987. So it seems to me that in general this process will be eased. It'll ease off. Intuitively, I feel this.
Do you agree, Mr. Gorbachev?
I would like to add here that I personally am categorically opposed to any inequality, no matter how it might be displayed between persons and in the country where we live. And I hope that Americans think the same way, where we have representatives of equal peoples. There cannot be prosperity and peace if we do not protect on a reliable basis the rights of all nations and all peoples. And incidentally, we adopted just now a declaration as to human rights, and the Congress was delighted to pass this law, so that this is the view in principle of the leadership of the country and of society as well. And I am opposed to chauvinism and nationalism and separatism and any destructive separatist approaches, and opposed to that we might in any fashion persecute or limit the rights of the Jewish people. I think that today we can speak about the fact that we cannot say that there is that anti-Semitism is given a free hand. I think that anti-Semitism is lessening. I hope that in the light of our democratic changes in the country, that this will eliminate these questions which have to do not only with the Jewish people, but also has to do with other peoples who have suffered in our country, and we wish to proceed very decisively in the future.
What is typical in the program for the restoration of churches and temples, the Orthodox Church, this list includes synagogues also. And that's significant also.
A question from Philadelphia. A question? Yes.
My name is Luba Ivanova, and I live most of my life in Moscow. Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin, I experienced that women in the Soviet Union were discriminated against in their career opportunity. What are you going to do about it?
Замечание у вас правильное.
That's a correct remark on your part.
Это общепризнано у нас.
This is commonly recognized in our country now.
В рамках наших Верховного Совета.
Both within the Supreme Soviet, in the republics, in society as well. We must pay tribute to our women for their heroism, for
трудных условиях.
that they have in difficult conditions displayed patience, stamina, and have reduced tension in our society. That once more demonstrates that the more we have women in the political structures of the country and all structures of society where the fates of society are being solved, we will have a more reliable and more safe society. We have already begun to adopt laws in this regard. And Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin might be able to illustrate them on using the Russian Federation as an illustration, as an example, so as to eliminate that which has been accumulated in this very sensitive area of the position of women in society. So I am, in this sense, very even grateful to you for having asked this question. I am very decisive in my view here. I'm certain there will be changes. As for the position of men, women, old men, women, and children, their position reflects the position of society as a whole. And this is of considerable concern to all of us today, and we are very much involved in this.
I agree with Mr. Gorbachev in this regard, although because of the difficulties and the difficult conditions in which our women live, nevertheless, they still manage to live 5 years longer than men in our country. Of course, that doesn't reassure us, because we see, even in our highest organs, there are practically no women. In the Supreme, for example, the Supreme Soviet. In the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation, a special law has been adopted about mothers, families. I think this is a very serious program designed to continue for several years, and we must see to it that there is a slant in our society which is unjust to women, and we must eliminate that.
Just pause, if I may, for just one moment to tell people here in the United States that this broadcast is not only being seen here, but is being seen in Russia and in the other republics. It's a little before 8 o'clock in the morning there. It's also going to be seen again in prime time. And as an indication of the level of the interest that there is in the joint appearance of these two men, it's also being seen in Central and Eastern Europe as well. Our next question comes from San Francisco. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Ann Cook, and I would like to ask Mr. Gorbachev how Raisa is.
I can now say to you that everything is fine now, normal. Let's just put it that way. Things are normal, and soon things will be great, and I thank you for expressing your concern.
You're happy, Ms. Cook, with that answer?
Thank you.
Okie doke. A reflection, I think, of the interest, Mr. Gorbachev, that your wife has generated in this country, as you well know. We have a question in New York City. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Hallowell. I'm with Citibank here in New York and work on Soviet projects with U.S. corporations. Mr. Gorbachev, you have made so many excellent decisions over the past year, great decisions. how did you allow those stupid coup plotters to serve in your government?
Yes, that's been a lesson for me. And if you think about the moral aspects of that which took place, then most of all, I am amazed and troubled by the treacherous and treasonous nature of their acts. I think that that which we are now doing within the framework of our democratic processes, the cooperation between the republics, I think that in the future we will be able to exclude the possibility of such mistakes in appointing personnel. We're going to cooperate on a very reliable basis so as to ensure that within the framework of the State Council, we'll be able to appoint the most reliable people to these key positions. And we now have our State Council, which has been created, and we have our senior personnel already in place.
Mr. Gorbachev, I wonder if Mr. Hallowell will let me follow up on that, whether or not you think that having those men as colleagues who moved against you undermines your credibility with the people who may decide or not decide to freely elect you as the president if you run.
I think that that which took place during these difficult days, days of difficult testing of this putsch, when I was from the very beginning convinced that the putsch would fail. And I think if these people had given more thought to the question, they should have known from the very beginning that this was doomed to failure. And the country is different, the world is a different world, and we ourselves have to resolve things. We need different, more democratic approaches. And for that reason, I think that people have the opportunity to think things through, and they know my position of the president, they know my devotion to democratic processes, and I think that they are asking themselves the same questions which are now being asked of me, and in all probability they will compare and decide, what does the president have most of? Which qualities? Can he make decisions? And then on that basis they will decide how they feel about him. And that's the way politics is.
Thank you, sir. Our next question comes from Los Angeles.
Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin, considering the dismal history of Soviet communism and of communism everywhere where it's been in charge, should any country in the world continue to live under communism?
Mr. Yeltsin, I'm sorry.
As for me...
No, please,
okay,
I'm sorry.
I'll let Mr. Yeltsin speak.
I think this experiment, which was conducted on our soil, was a tragedy for our people, and it was too bad that it happened on our territory. It would have been better if this experiment had been conducted in some small country at least, so as to make it clear that it was a utopian idea, although a beautiful one. I think gradually this will come to be understood by other countries where supporters of the idea of communism still exist.
Mr. Gorbachev?
As for my views on this very complex question, I would sum up my view as follows. The historical experience which we have accumulated has allowed us to say in a decisive fashion that that model has failed, which was brought about in our country. And I believe that this is a lesson not only for our people, but for all peoples. But at the same time, this induces me to turn to the experience of other countries all the more, where a devotion to the socialist idea has led to very interesting results, both with regard to democracy and the development of the economy, of human rights. I have in mind perhaps here the fact that the leadership of many European states and governments is in the hands of socialists, and they are successfully resolving a number of questions. Now, with regard to the next part, what would we recommend to other peoples? I believe it would be, on our part, somewhat pretentious to indicate to peoples how they should live. Let them examine our experience, their own experience, the experience of other countries, and make their own selection. I think that here, each people has the right of selection. This is a matter of principle with regard to my own views, and I'm going to follow that position.
Our next question comes from Atlanta in Georgia.
My name is Charlie Battle. I'm with the Atlanta Committee for the Olympic Games. With regard to Olympic participation, can we expect that each republic will send a separate team to the Olympics, or will there be an effort made to send one Soviet team as in the past?
Yes. I think that, nevertheless, we have enough athletes, in spite of all the difficulties of the last few years, that we can cooperate very intimately, and we can get together within the Union, participate in competitions, support our contacts. We're now discussing these problems. I think that this is their right, their prerogative, and I think that they will come to an agreement themselves. They all, that is, republics, have a good deal of independence just now.
What do you think, Mr. Yeltsin? Would you like to see a Russian team come to the 1992 Olympics in Atlanta all by itself, or would you like to come as a team representing all the republics? And what flag would you like to come under?
I think there has to be a team representing the whole country, since right now, regardless of the independence, our three republics, the Baltic republics, nevertheless, athletes are taking part in our national teams, and I think this should apply to the Olympic Games. I think that they will do that in the Olympic Games. Russia has no pretensions towards putting forward its own separate team. As to the flag, if it's going to be one representing the whole country, then it must be the flag of the whole country.
Are you going to design a new flag for the country, do you think?
Well, we have the one that we've always had for the time being, but it's not impossible that the design on the flag will change. The Russian Federation, during the coup, we had another flag during that time, the tricolor, which existed in Russia. I'm sure the crest will change, and there'll be other design for the Russian Federation, but in terms of the Supreme Soviet, I don't think there's any legislation on the cards for that right now.
I think that we'll conclude a new agreement of sovereign states, and we'll have a constitution within the framework of which we will examine these questions. We will either reconfirm the current symbols or create new symbols. That is a derivative of the process of reforming our union.
Question from Detroit, Michigan. Yes, sir.
Oldest Sepals, Latvian Association, Detroit. President Yeltsin, who is the Western leader you most admire, and why?
Well, you know, I felt very much in support. I felt very much the support of the whole world community during the coup, the 72-hour coup, when dozens of heads of states called directly to me to inquire what the situation was like, how the circumstances were, to express their support. And that was very important. Twice a day I spoke with President Bush, practically. So I give my preference to him.
I'm sure our listener would like to know your answer to that, Mr. Gorbachev, too.
I've interacted with current politicians for a number of years, and I have the opinion that history has produced a situation where the world is changing and all countries are going through major changes, and we have in positions of leadership political leaders who are courageous, and I very highly value my interactions with them. Inasmuch as we are speaking here about Americans and about our dialogue with them, I very highly value that which has come to be between the leaderships of our countries during the period when Mr. Reagan was in office, and which is still further developed under the leadership of President Bush. I highly value this interaction. We have developed mutual understanding, cooperation, close personal relations, and a mutual liking of each other. And I think that assists us in understanding each other and perhaps helps us to resolve some of the most difficult questions. I think that today's relations between the USSR and USA this is a crucial question, and if we did not have that, we would not have those healthy tendencies in the world today which inspire all of us, inspire a feeling of hopefulness in all of us for the future.
The question from Miami.
My name is Len Collins. President Gorbachev, you're probably the most popular world leader here in the United States, yet you are much less popular in the Soviet Union. I would like to know what you're planning on doing to change your image with the Soviet people.
Well, you know, the main thing is to proceed along our present course and move society to new forms of life and attempt to improve the life of people. Without this, no tricks, no press devices, no put-on scenarios will produce anything. That's the chief thing. That's my chief concern, and that's my view. And I think that we have total agreement in this regard with Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, and that is what is of greatest concern to us today.
Philadelphia,
Hello, my name is Gene Bortnick. I have a question for both Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin. When we buy a factory in your country or a building, what assurance do we have that someone will not come into this factory or building and confiscate it and tell us it's not ours anymore?
I think that this question arises when you are thinking about past experience. Today, we are creating very strong governmental guarantees which are reflected both in the Constitution and in yesterday's Declaration of Rights and Freedoms, and also in specialized legislation which has been passed and which has to deal with foreign citizens and foreign investors. Here, everything in a radical fashion is being altered, and I confirm that the state guarantees that a purchased factory and the property rights are to be observed within the framework of the law.
San Francisco.
So don't be concerned about that and act boldly.
Hi, my name is Dave Barham. I'd like to stay on the question of economic infrastructure. How do you plan to help millions of Soviet citizens, individuals, use the tools of technology, things like fax machines, telephones, computers, to compete in the global economy?
Mr. Yeltsin, perhaps you'd like to answer that.
Among the programs which we have in mind, including by the Russian government and the Union government, this includes the development of electronics. And no, the investments are increasing many-fold compared with the investments in other fields. And I think this kind of leap forward in terms of all this electronic technology is something which will come in our country. Although, of course, it's difficult to catch up the United States in this because we've lagged far behind. And we're not making it our target to do everything possible to catch up and overtake. We're doing it in a civilized way.
I can add a few words to that. Agreeing with that which Boris Nikolaevich said, we proceed from the supposition that at the initial stages of moving toward the market, we have to do some things establishing priorities. We have small privatization of small and medium-sized businesses, those enterprises which might be rapidly incorporated into market conditions. We also need to create a market infrastructure within which we might deal with those problems that you have asked about. We understand that this is necessary for the market, and therefore everything that is necessary to create a market we view as a central question, and we are going to work very closely with Western countries in that regard.
Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin, I think you both know that a great many of your countrymen live in Brighton Beach in New York City, and we have a question from there. Go ahead, please.
I'm Vladimir Goldstern. Are there still political prisoners in the Soviet Union and in Russia? And what will happen to them?
Mr. Gorbachev?
We considered, and I believe that Boris Nikolaevich also considered, that we don't have them. That's how we were informed. But as of the last few days, we have been told that there are people, a few persons, who are imprisoned for mixed criminal and political factors. We have handed this question over to the proper bodies to be examined, and we hope that the next day or two to learn about this. We've asked our law and order bodies to look into the question and decisively determine what the situation is. Without question, we stand firmly for this position, and that is the position of our society as a whole, that people should not be persecuted for dissidents or for their political views.
Would you like to add anything to this particular cases that Mr. Gorbachev is referring to, Mr. Yeltsin?
I entirely agree. And we do have a list, and we're working on these lists specifically in order to release those people who have been illegally detained, convicted for their convictions. I think there are 21 people on the list as of today.
Do you know what the crimes are they're accused of?
Mr. Gorbachev has already said there are mixed types of crime, but this includes those people who've been put in prison for their convictions. We have to acknowledge that, and we will restore justice as soon as possible.
At least the Minister of Internal Affairs has told me that there are 6 persons who have been convicted where we have a very clear situation, and they're going to be asked that these persons be released.
Thank you. Philadelphia.
My name is Svetlana Ilnitska. Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev, what are you doing to help the sick children of Chernobyl?
You know, the problem has proven to be the problem of consequences of Chernobyl has proved to be very complicated. And there have been a number of complications and surprises for us here. We are now examining the development of a special program in Russia, the Ukraine, and Belarus, and we have linked them into an all-union program. We have a budget to finance this program, and first of all, of course, we have the problem of the children of Chernobyl. We have attached special importance to this problem. Here we are speaking of making it impossible for children to live in this zone. And within the course of 91, all the republics, all these 3 republics that is, with the participation of the other republics, will undertake measures to resettle them, inasmuch we have adults living there as well. Perhaps they don't suffer the consequences, but children are more subject to the consequences. Then there's the question of food and nutrition. We want to keep the situation under control, and we are grateful to all those countries who are participating through their various bodies and forms of rendering assistance, including the Americans. And we are giving this assistance, first of all, to the children. As for the health measures with regard to children and their summer camps and other areas, we're doing everything that we can. As for observation is concerned, medical observation, this also is an important problem. We are not always successful, but at any rate, we are concerned first and foremost about the younger generation, but also about other people as well.
Mr. Gorbachev, permit me a follow-up. Do you think it is possible for a future Soviet government to ever lie to its own people again, the way the Soviet government lied to its own people and the world about what went on at Chernobyl?
You know, this is a complicated question, Mr. Jennings. Truly, there are factors which permit us to say that not all the truth was revealed, and that is inadmissible. But you know that this is a problem so complicated that we simply have not yet been able to totally and fully evaluate all the questions. But at any rate, I believe that if we continue our democratic transformations, and if we continue to stimulate and support this atmosphere of glasnost which we have developed as of late, then this possibility is excluded. For this will all be under the control of the people through their democratic institutions, which have been elected democratically, and through glasnost and through our press.
I'd just like to add something. It's not just a matter of Chernobyl. We had Chelyabinsk also in 1957. And what happened there? There was a radioactive fallout, and what was hidden from the people, and the fact that it was hidden is a crime, of course. And this is a great lesson, and we're now taking measures so that the consequences can be minimized, because it seems just materially impossible fully to exclude these consequences. More than 30 years have now gone by, but measures are being taken, and the necessary measures are being taken there. But the lesson is this. Now the people, the population itself, will not permit that such a disaster will be hidden from them in such circumstances.
Thank you both. Houston, Texas.
Gentlemen, Russia is richer in natural resources than America, so your people could become as affluent as we are. However, are they willing to learn to work hard and take risks in a free market economy?
Mr. Yeltsin?
People are trying to convince, the opponents of a market economy are trying to convince us, and private property, that our people won't understand. I think the people have spoken, they do understand, and they accept. In popular elections for the presidency of Russia, I came forward with a program for private property, different kinds of property owning, a market economy, entrepreneurship, foreign investment, to open the door wide for foreign investors in Russia and create for them equal conditions, give state guarantees on behalf of Russia, and the people understand that and accept it. So the people itself, of course, is capable of working harder. The Russian people is talented, they have good traditions, but the system, as you have seen yourself, cramped us so much that it prevented the human being from expressing himself, developing himself. He did no property. There was no opportunity to do it. There was a ceiling put on salaries, a low ceiling. Now these, as Pavlov said, and these restrictions are being removed. And however much a person can earn, that's how much he will earn. There'll be no restrictions from now on. So we've prepared a legislative basis, we've adopted in the Supreme Soviet to see to it that people can really live better. But of course a lot depends now on the organizers of production and on our joint efforts, our efforts jointly with you, to change our technology in various areas which is backward and has lagged behind.
I'd like to add a few words to this very large question. Fundamentally, I share the view of Boris Nikolaevich that in democratizing our economic life, we, in the same fashion, are altering the conditions for labor. I have in mind here the opportunities for initiative. That's the main thing. I also would like to say here that recently in talking to Mr. Bush, we discussed a group of experts coming to our country and deciding, and for them to decide and see what's happening in our country. And this group, or rather competent individuals, was formed and visited the Ukraine, the Northern Caucasus. They visited us here in Moscow, in the Moscow area, and they were amazed by what they saw. Many of them had been studying the Soviet Union for a number of years. For example, the Sovietologist, Mr. Hewitt, Ed Hewitt, who was the aide to President Bush. They were amazed that in a year there were a number of changes that had taken place. They saw a lot of active, interesting people who were truly conducting businesses and had interesting plans. So life is changing. Of course, our conversation does not allow me to go into detail here with regard to specific data on cooperatives and farmers, leasers. There's more and more of them. This is a process which is taking place on a very large scale.
In a few months, 30,000 farms and holdings have been created just in the year.
Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin, I think you probably both have some sense of how eagerly people in America waited to hear the two of you this week. I think you also have a full appreciation of how fascinated Americans have been with what has been going on in your country this week. We also know that you both have a meeting with some of the new political institutions which you have put in place and that you want to go. So on behalf of Americans all across the country who've listened to you tonight, it's been very enlightening. Thank you both very much, President Gorbachev and President Yeltsin.
Well, we'll say goodbye. We've been very happy to meet with Americans in this program, but we neglected to apologize for, not because we maliciously intended it that way, that we have delayed this program. We wanted to meet after the Congress, so please accept our apologies. We've been very happy to come.
And saying farewell, I'd also like to thank President Bush and the whole American people for their support in the course of the 3 tragic, dramatic days for Russia, for our country, and I believe for the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. President Gorbachev and President Yeltsin. Perhaps you'll stay with us for just a second. They both now go off to meet with the first of the sort of inter-republic institutions that they put together on this last day, or over these last 3 days. And we thank you very much for joining us here. And we'll be right back.
This ABC News special, a national town meeting, with President Gorbachev and President Yeltsin taking questions from Americans, will continue from New York and around the country in a moment.
In St. George's Hall there is Vladimir Posner. He was the person in the 3rd chair you saw during the interview, and he is the person working for Moscow Radio and Television who has been explaining to the Soviet people what's been going on here this evening. Mr. Posner, you can hear me, I see.
I can hear you very well indeed.
So what's going on there at the moment?
Well, Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Yeltsin were encircled by a crowd of people who had books by these two gentlemen, and they wanted their signatures. And we talked a little bit, and I said, didn't they think they should talk to the Soviet people like they did to the American people for a change? And they agreed to do that. I don't know when they will. But they seem to be very happy with what happened today. They enjoyed it, they said, and they said it was a good experience.
I thought they were particularly polite with one another. Do you think they were, in fact, more candid with Americans than they might be with the Soviets?
I think that they were trying harder to explain things, but I felt that they were very natural, both of them. I think that Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev were very much their usual selves, and when they wanted to say something very loudly and clearly, they said it. Now they're leaving the hall. As you can see, I'm being blocked out by the security.
I'm very impressed by your authority.
I just shook hands with President Yeltsin as he was leaving, and maybe, finally, when this crowd kind of disappears, I'll be able to talk to you.
Well, no, I can hear you fine. Why don't you just continue? I think our director here is probably having a wonderful time.
I've now said goodbye to President Gorbachev, and I finally think that this place is clearing up. Here we are. I enjoyed it. You know, I think it went very, very well, and I don't know what the response is going to be in the Soviet Union, but I feel that people are going to be very happy with what happened.
One of the things I think people here will have noticed was this rather careful relationship, rather careful deference in both cases, one paid to the other. As an observer there now who's watched all this go on, what do you think the state is of their relationship at the moment? And I want to be sure you're candid while they're still in the room.
Okay, let me say that it's a very delicate relationship. I think that President Gorbachev realizes he owes his existence today to President Yeltsin and to a man he was not fair to, and to a man he hurt very badly. And now he has to be profoundly grateful to that man. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think he's handling it very well, and I think that by and large, Yeltsin is also trying to forget about the past. Although you remember that first question, Yeltsin was very, very clear as to the kind of relationship they used to have.
Is there anything in the answers which jumped out at you particularly vis-a-vis the current relationship between the center and the various republics?
One thing that jumped out at me was the way Yeltsin said, we will deal with the Chicago grain market ourselves. We don't, and in fact, when you, Peter, asked, does that mean you don't care about the other republics, he basically said, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So I was somewhat surprised.
What does that say then about the credibility of the new agreement to have a center made up of seemingly cooperative republics?
Well, I think what it means is that there will be a center of republics that try to cooperate, but the bottom line is my interests come first, and that's the whole problem of trying to get that cooperation. It's a new thing, and it's not going to be easy to achieve, notwithstanding all the nice words that were said by both presidents.
I was impressed by a young man in Miami, I think it was, who asked Mr. Gorbachev what he was going to do to fix up his image. When we were there before the coup, I think he was around 14–15% in the polls, and he takes polls very carefully. If he were to run for the presidency of the Union now in a free election, how would he do?
Well, it depends against whom. If he were to run against Yeltsin, he'd lose.
But Yeltsin wouldn't run, would he?
No, Yeltsin wants to be president of Russia. He feels much more secure that way. According to the latest polls, he doesn't seem to have anyone more popular, except perhaps Mr. Sobchak, the mayor of Leningrad. But when he was asked, would you run for president, he said, I should want such a headache. So, you know, in that sense, perhaps Gorbachev would be reelected.
So the possibility is, at least, that he might run in a free election for president and be supported by Yeltsin because they've worked out their relationship.
I think that's a very good view of how it might work. And then, of course, with Yeltsin really behind him, Gorbachev would win easily.
Okay, thanks very much, Vladimir. There are a couple of people at Gostel Radio, the Soviet radio and television, we'd like to thank. Yegor Yakovlev, who was most instrumental in putting this together. He's the chairman of the Soviet State Committee. And Vladimir Lazutkin, who was very helpful to us, Valentin Lazutkin, who is the vice chairman, and Leonid Zolotorevsky, who some of you may remember as my opposite number on a series of broadcasts we did called Capital to Capital between Washington and Moscow in the days when things were not quite this chaotic. Not much to say in conclusion, except that I found it absolutely fascinating, and I hope you did at home as well. Thank you for staying up late in some cases with us. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters in New York. Good night.
watching tonight at 8 on OPB for John Denver and the Tanglewood Festival Chorus on Evening at Pops.